in season two. I'm very happy about this. I'm excited actually. Nasheed was supposed to bring cake today, but I think because it's Ramadan, we're gonna give him a little bit of a break. I'm Lazina, and with me is my co-host Nasheed, and today we have the pleasure of talking to our new friend Cam. Cam's got some really amazing perspective. Spoke to him for like 5 minutes. I was like, I gotta have this guy on here. But I've also been following you a lot. Well, not a lot. I'm following you, so your stuff comes up, and I really appreciate your perspective and the different podcast space that you have been. Sheed, would you like to say something, and then let's throw Cam in the limelight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the little introductions, Lizina, right? And good to have you, Cam. And this is our officially season two, right? And last season, we have a lot of activities with the coaches, real life stories, and everything. And I look forward, and we look forward to hear all your amazing stories. And definitely the audience is really eager to hear as well. So let's kickstart. Cam, the
All
floor is
right.
yours.
All right, great. So I'm really happy to be here as well. Thank you for both of you for having me on. And I'll just kind of get started by introducing myself and what I talk about and why I talk about it. So, my name is Kam Knight. I'm a coach, international speaker, and author of a dozen books, many of which you see behind me here, in the area of mental, physical, and emotional performance that have sold over 500,000 copies and have over 10,000 ratings on Amazon. And now I talk about a concept called internal resistance. And it answers a question I had my whole life. And that is, why is it if I want to do something, I know what to do, I know how to do it, and I have the motivation and desire to do it, but for one reason or another, I can or don't do it. Now, at the time, there were no clear answers. The best answers I heard or I came across was related to beliefs, that you needed to have positive beliefs or not have limiting beliefs. And yes, beliefs are part of the equation, but it's a very small piece to a much larger puzzle. And over really the last 20 years, that question lingered in my mind. Every time I was stuck, I wondered why. Why can't I get stuff done? Why do I keep spinning my wheels? Why don't I just do this dang thing so I can get the result that I want? And the more books I read and coaching I did and seminars I attended, the more I learned about the complexities of the human mind and body. And unknown to me, I think my brain was processing all that information in the background for years and years. And at a certain point, I had this epiphany where I was like, wow, there's a part of our mind designed to hold us back. There's a part of our brain built to keep us from growing and making progress. And I call this part resistance, and is this brick wall that we hit anytime that we want to do something, but we can't, no matter how much we want to do it.
Absolutely agree with that. I was actually thinking this morning. I was talking to my daughter, and I was thinking about when it comes to emotions in general or relationships, because that's kind of the world that I live in, how to make relationships work. We have to be able to be. We already understand each other's love languages and our attachment styles. So why is it that when we do personal development and everything that's like that has a transformation in it, but then when it comes to conflict, why is it that we still end up fighting? And that
Yeah,
takes me to the resistance. Well, it's multiple resistances at that point, but
yeah,
that's where my mind went as you were saying that. I was literally thinking about that. And Cam, I'm going to mention this because my favorite phrase, I did mention it to you earlier. A
yeah,
friend of mine, we whenever we talk about this kind of subject, it's always like, well, let's resist the resistances, and we even do like a little dance. We're going to resist the resistances, and that's
yeah,
allows us to really explore what is under there. So
yeah,
that also makes me, it internally makes me question myself in some ways, and what is the resistance, what does the resistance, my god, what is the resistance is usually trying to teach me or show me that's underneath there.
yeah. So I'll start by saying I love that quote. I haven't heard it before, and it's a really good way of looking at it because resistance will come up. And when we're doing something, and one of the best ways to move forward is to resist that resistance so we can move forward. And to answer your questions, it really helps to understand how the whole resistance process plays out. So, the part of the brain that creates wants works separate from the part that allows us to act on the want. Now, this is really important, so I'll say it one more time. The part of the brain that creates desires work separate and independent from the part that actually allows us to act on that desire. So we have one part of the brain which is creating wants and desires, and in many ways is unrestrained. So it's creating wants one after another at a pace faster than any one person can achieve. And so this part of the brain, it was never meant to check to see if a want was achievable, fulfilling, or worth going after. Its only job is to create wants. And in many ways, it kind of is creating wants endlessly. And then we have another part of the brain that checks to see if the want is achievable and fulfilling. And this is a part that is our, let's just say, discriminator to see if we should go after a want or not. So it's possible for one brain to both create a desire for something and at the same time keep us from going after it. In fact, what I often say is before I learned this, I used to think whoever created humanity, whether it was God, evolution, or aliens, must have been really sick and twisted because how could they do this to us? How could they create a desire in us, and sometimes a really burning one, and then keep us from going after it? But when you look at it from this perspective, it makes so much more sense. In fact, when we have this tug of war going on, it's because we have one part of the brain creating a desire and another part saying, wait a minute, you can't go after that. And so, how does this part play out? Well, anytime an option or a decision stands before you, it gets filtered by resistance using a whole host of criterias. And if resistance doesn't give the green light, you can't act. Or if that decision is not in line with any of the criterias, you can't act. So it helps to think about standing before a panel of judges or board of directors. Every decision that comes up must go through all the members. And if even one of the members is against the idea, it will not pass. So then the next question is, well, what are the criteria? What's a checklist that resistance is going through to decide if we should do something or not? And this is where things get a little bit more complicated because there's a lot of criteria. Like in my work, I found at least a good 2 to 3 dozen. And some of the more commonly known ones that get talked about in personal development include things like beliefs. So beliefs are one reason resistance comes up. So if I don't believe something is possible, of course resistance will keep me from going after it. But what's even more, I can believe something is possible, but if deep down my unconscious doesn't believe it's possible for me, it won't let me go after it. And there's a even deeper part of the equation to just the belief because we have what's called core beliefs that kind of run essentially almost everything we do. And they include things like I'm not enough, I don't deserve, I'm too much, I'm broken. And so even though we might think something is possible, like we could see somebody doing something and they're having success, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And we can believe that it's possible for us because we've done something similar. But if we have a core belief, then it doesn't matter if we think it's possible for us, that will keep us from going after it. But that's again, is just one checklist. And these checklists goes deep. It goes into things like self-image, into facing something bigger, core needs, and even our demographics play into our resistance. Meaning, I think I can say we're all Daisies in this conversation right now. And so I'll share a quick story. I wasn't born in the US. I immigrated here when I was young. And the part of the world that I come from is so starkly different from the US. Like, it's so different. I had it was a complete shock to my brain. And although no one ever said this, at a certain point when I was young, my brain came to the conclusion because I am ethnic, I'm brown, or quote unquote, don't look like the people here, that there was a certain level of success I couldn't have. There was a certain level of things I couldn't do. Like I could maybe be studious, but not, foray into other activities. And it was so true. It was as if the belief was like the sky was blue. And no one could ever say anything that could convince me otherwise. And I lived it as such. So as I'm growing up and different opportunities came up for me, I would have resistance to doing it. Even though I wanted to do it, even though I saw others doing it, there was this thing that was running underneath that was so deep that would always stop me. Oftentimes, it would allow me to get started, but when I was making progress or getting to the end, I somehow sabotaged myself until I got to the end. Now, I know I kind of talked a lot, but this is just to kind of set the framework for the topic, and I'll hand the mic over to you guys for any questions, comments, and all of that.
When you were sharing about the brain and the core group of people, the council,
Yeah,
immediately in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, that's my teenager. That's my inner teen.
yeah,
That's the one that went vengeful, that chose to
yeah,
believe. I always say that I think when I was about 4 or 5, I chose to believe that my father didn't want me. And that
yeah,
I made decisions upon decisions that reinforced that belief with every single thing I did. And it wasn't
yeah,
until I was able to go and it's in layers, right? It's like, wait, why am I uh, not happy? Why am I upset? Why
yeah,
did I just yell at a bunch of people and now I have regret and I have shame and now I gotta like tuck my tail in and go back and say sorry? Why is
yeah,
it that when I'm at work and I'm not performing in a way that I need the validation for? Like, it just seemed like it was a lot of needing other people's validation
yeah,
and not feeling good enough and the people pleasing, and that all like peeled back into so many different layers. There
yeah,
was a time I was doing mindset coaching. My sister in law at the time suggested it. She's like, oh my God, you're into personal development. Go to mindset coaching. And that's when I learned about our thoughts create our reality. Like, I was in my 40s, not knowing anything at all about what is resistance or what's not resistance or what's a belief. It just all started with like, okay, how am I participating in all of the things in my life? A part of that was resistant too because I felt blamed. And I think coming from a Daisy culture, so to speak, women, we are a blame based culture versus
yeah,
like a UK culture was more of a shame based culture. So we internalize everything. I'm the reason, I'm the fault.
yeah,
And so being able to go into those layers really helped me see how that one little belief, like I chose to believe that, and it reinforced every single thing. It was
yeah.
crazy.
So much to unpack here. And that is exactly what I meant by when I said core belief. Because as humans, we have all sorts of beliefs. And some of our more general beliefs or more specific beliefs related to an activity or goal can hinder us. But like I said, if we have a core belief that I think for you, it was my dad doesn't love me, so I'm not enough.
Hmm.
And because you're not enough, anytime the want or desire gets created, it filters through resistance, and resistance goes, should I do this? And it goes through the checklist, and it's like, oh, but I'm not enough. And either it'll not let you do it or make it much harder and more complicated than it needs to be, where you have to put in so much more effort just because so you could feel enough for it.
Yeah.
And when I said there's so much to unpack, it's that it goes deeper than that. And the reason it was you had that deep core belief is that almost a lot of our issues really stem all the way down to our mom and dad. It's that approval that we didn't get and the connections we made because of it, and then how it's running and driving our life. Like even the desire to have a nice car or pick a certain job and all these things that we might not even think is related to our past comes all the way down to my mom didn't love me and I'm upset, so I'm acting out this way. Or my mom didn't love me, or I don't feel enough, so I got to prove myself. Or my dad didn't love me and I have these low beliefs, and so I'm living a life of mediocrity or even less. And it all really stems down to that. And what's really crazy is, again, we're just hitting up on one of the criterias. There's other criterias, and I mentioned one of them, the demographics piece. And there's other criterias too, and I'll just throw another one just so people could kind of understand how this checklist works. So it has to do with self-image, and this is kind of crazy. As we're growing up, we start to create different self-images of ourselves, and we create them based on what we think people respond to or is going to get us success. So I'm sure you guys have been there, but as we're growing up, we might create a self image that we're cool or that we're studious or that we're, tech savvy. And the brain can get locked on that self image and wants to reinforce and protect it. So it becomes easier to do the things that will reinforce that self-image. So if I see myself as cool and that self-image is defined by, well, cool people don't study or cool people, throw out jokes in class or are rowdy, then I'm going to start acting in that way. And when it is time to study or do things that can be helpful, if it doesn't align with cool, then I'm going to have a hard time doing it. But there's an even bigger piece to it. Because if we still want to do something that is going to reinforce that identity, but deep down the brain thinks we might experience difficulty or that activity might damage our self image, then resistance can come up as well. And what I mean by that is, let's say I see myself as smart, but I still find myself procrastinating or sabotaging. Well, why am I doing that? It's because if I do that thing and things don't go well, or I experience more challenge than my identity says I should, then I have to confront the fact that I'm not as smart as I make myself out to be. So it's much easier not to do the thing and hold on to that self image than to do it and face the possibility of proving it wrong. And so it gets kind of nuanced. And, a lot of times people come to me asking me exact their issues. I'm like, it's a lot more complicated than that. And they might get a little impatient. And I tell them, hey, you guys can go get the cookie cutter surface level answers, but you're going to be just as stuck as you are right now. So if you really want to move through this, it helps to go through these little nuances.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with so much of that, and I want to say more. But I also need to give Nasheed a chance because he is
Yeah.
a co-host. You're not gonna
Yeah.
bat it away.
No, I was listening, and I was just relating to all the things that Cam and you are sharing, right? And the only things matter is what we have is one of the criteria is resistance, right? So being a coach, initially when I did my certifications and everything, I had the resistance, like being a guy from Bangladesh, being a Deshi guy, right? So how
Yeah.
can I coach to the people around the world and everything? And that really pulled me. The bad side of my negative side of my brain told me that no, you cannot do it. The another side is say like, why? Because if everyone can do it, why can't you? And then gradually what I thought of it is like, okay, I need to support my right brain, right, which is
Yeah.
like giving me
The
all
want.
these positive parts. And now when I check my mentees, they're from Africa, they're from Ecuador, they're from Spain, they're from USA, and they're also from the Bangladesh point of time. And I see it's just a thing, like you need to overcome that resistance, right? And you need to ask yourself, it's the only you who can decide, and also the surroundings as well. But the only question answered is asking yourself, like, am I going to do it or should I stop? Right. So
Yeah.
coming back to that and coming back to that perspectives, so a lot of the times we really push through the resistance and avoid it like completely, right? So in your case, like what you have learned about working with the resistance, like you need to get back to that, avoid that, or maybe you need to have fighting modes to overcome it. So what will be your message to the people who is like stuck in between the
Yeah.
resistance and fighting it?
Yeah. So this is a very good point, and I want to reiterate what I think I'm hearing, and you can confirm, and then I can go into the answer. I think what you're saying is yes, we have a lot of causes of resistance, but at the end of the day, we make the decision to move forward. And that is really good thinking. In fact, a lot of the personal development gurus like Tony Robbins, Brendan Burchard, and so much are talking about that. And I remember when I was working through resistance, I could complicate things because it's so nuanced. But at the end of the day, it can be just as simple as, you know what? If anyone can do this, why can't I do it? And I should just be able to do it. And that's a very good approach. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for everybody, which is why I think it does help to get into the nuances of what exactly is holding them back. Because for you, it was demographics, and some of the resistance I experienced was also that. And that's a little bit easier to move forward. But then some of these things get really nuanced and complicated where it's not as simple as just making the decision to move forward. And I'll give a really good example. Another reason resistance comes up is for what I call core needs or core pains. And what I mean by that is we humans are built with all sorts of needs: the need for love, attention, affection, and even physical contact. When we don't receive it, it's painful, extremely painful. The kind of pain that can make a person go crazy. Now, if a person is growing up and their brain learns that these needs can't be met, won't be met, or is too dangerous to be met, their brain will keep them from going after these needs. Makes sense, right? But because these are core needs, the need doesn't go away. It gets louder and stronger. But because the brain feels these needs can't be met or won't be met, it feels it has no other choice but to distract us from the pain. Now, there's many ways the brain will distract us from that pain. Some of the more common things could be television, social media, drinking, alcohol, and all of that.
Doom scrolling.
Doom scrolling, yes. Usually, when you're doom scrolling, is because you have this core need that your brain feels can't be met. Another way is by making life difficult, challenging, and making you procrastinate and sabotage. So your focus is always on problems in your life and not the pain. And I'll give a really quick story. I knew somebody who wanted nothing more in life than the love of his dad, but his dad never gave it to him. And it was painful. It hurt him a lot. So much so that he lived a hectic life, living from paycheck to paycheck, never being able to make ends meet. And the reason his brain was orchestrating all that is because if his life was good, then this pain would be at the forefront of his awareness to deal with. But because his brain felt like that pain couldn't be dealt with because he was never going to get the love of his dad, well, it felt it had no choice but to distract him from that pain. And so this pain can show up in other ways where I know men experience this, where as they're growing up, something happens where they feel like they can't get a girl or girls won't like them. So as they're growing, they have this thing, this pain to want to have intimacy, but a part of their brain says it can't happen and there's a lot of pain and they start spiraling downward. So something like that, we can't necessarily logically just say, hey, I should just do this thing because the resistance is very deep. It's trying to protect us from a really awful pain because the pain of not receiving love, intimacy, it can be so intense. It can be so much for a person that their brain would rather have them either go into self-destructive mode or the opposite can happen where they become hyper vigilant in becoming like a A-type personality. So what I'm saying is a lot of A-type people, people who are actually successful, aren't successful because they're trying to get somewhere, but they're trying to avoid something. And this is how they avoid the core pains and needs. Yes, I do agree with your point that it should just be easy because if others can do it, we should be able to do it and just go ahead and do it. But then sometimes it really isn't. And it does help to look at the deeper stuff.
A lot of what you're saying resonates so much with me because I don't know if I mentioned this a lot, but I don't know if I've shared this with you, Cam. My children and
Yeah.
I, we go to an inner child workshop every 2 months,
Yeah.
and it's very experiential. It follows Alfred Adler's theory of attachments and
Yeah.
inferiority and superiority. So it's been my youngest daughter, especially as she's learning about life. And we're learning the journey together. It's like, as human beings, we all have emotional needs. I didn't know what my emotional needs were until I was 41.
Yeah.
And that's when I even started to explore what my emotional needs were. Whenever I am triggered, it's an emotional need that's not being met. And
Yes.
how I behave in that moment, it can cause ruptures in relationships, or it could cause togetherness. And so when I'm dysregulated, if I don't know how to name what it is that I need, then my nervous system is not able to be regulated enough to enter a conversation that can have truth being told and being able to receive and listen to what the actual issue is, rather than, well, you yelled at me, now I'm upset, and we're going around the
Yeah.
triggers and dancing around that pole instead of the, well, didn't feel significant, I didn't feel important, I didn't feel like you cared about me in that moment, and being able to hear that that's what the other person is feeling too. So that's why I created the relationship repair language, so that we can give a name to our needs, so that we can be in better relationships with each other, because each of us, every single one of us, came already from our nervous system. We learn about our emotional needs and our physical safety from 0 to 3 years old. So we're running around as adults now that have deep rooted belief in those very formidable years that we were never really taught attachments, healthy attachments. And I think when people hear that, there's this resistance to, oh, I'm going to blame my parents. When to me, it's not blaming your parents, it's going back and acknowledging that that need wasn't being met And instead of energetically storing that in your body and demanding it from other relationships, you're able to go and healthily reparent that moment, meet that need, so that we can show up and be in better relationships with each other. But to even get to those types of deep conversation, we have to look at the resistance internally in the first place. And that is a rabbit hole, like you said. Not just
Yeah.
behaviors, it is not just boundaries, it is a whole concept of a human being that needs to be unfolded. And when talking to other people, it can be very frustrating because I can hear what they're saying and I can tell that this person has not done any integration work and they're still operating from a belief. And so it's like, well,
Yeah.
you're going to get the blunt version or you're going to get the softer version.
Yeah.
Whichever one you want, that resistance is really up to that other person to really want to have in curiosity. So
So again, so much to pack here, and I'm going to see if I can remember all the things I want to say and riff on. First, I love Alfred Adler. He is, one of the OGs of the unconscious stuff, and I think he was a student of
right.
Freud, if I'm not
I have a
mistaken.
whole story about him, Freud, and Jung. I'll tell you about that later. But continue.
Okay, cool. And I love the concept he did bring about with the superiority and inferiority. And when we have a superiority or superiority complex, is because it's in response to inferiority. So when we see a superiority, we're actually experiencing both inferiority and superiority at the same time. So he's great. And the inner child stuff is big. And it's another reason resistance comes up. So I told you about the checklist, right? We have the beliefs, then we obviously have core beliefs, habits play into the thing, self image, and the self image can get pretty complex, the core needs. But then if we still start working through all the different layers of resistance, we get to the inner child. And I want to kind of describe the inner child in a way that can make sense is as we're growing up, our inner child gets hurt and it gets some kind of damaged. In its most weakest point, it actually becomes a person inside of us. It's an actual entity. It seems like what I have a child living in me. It's hard to believe. It's not like a esoteric concept because I take people into their unconscious and it's literally a child living in them. And that child is afraid to be abandoned. So a lot of times when a person's having success and they're moving forward, that child feels like it's going to get abandoned and it starts sabotaging that person from moving forward. And this is where procrastination and sabotage can show up as well because of this inner child. And I love what you said about when people think you go back to the past is about blaming. It's not about blaming, it's just kind of getting to the root cause of what's going on and addressing it. So there is a little bit of blaming component to it, but it's really not so much blaming. And if there is blaming, it's just allowing that inner child to express that anger and frustration for not having its needs met at that point. So that's really important as well. So again, the human mind and body are so complex.
It really is.
It really, yeah, what I'm really trying to bring to people with this concept of internal resistance is that it's a little bit more complex and nuanced than we may think. One, and more importantly, what the industry leads us to believe. Because yes, the industry can make simplify it. Like I remember when I got into personal development early on, it was just you can do it, you can do anything, and it would trigger these euphoric feelings, and these feelings made me feel like yes, I can, and my thought would start running of all the things I was going to do once I got back from the seminar or once I finished the book and how great life was going to be. But once those feelings faded, I was still stuck. And understanding the complexity can help us realize that it's not because we lack motivation or discipline, it's there deeper complex things that are going on that either we weren't told about or kind of in some ways misled to believe. And so, this is the opportunity to kind of shine a light on those things and truly really work through them.
Absolutely. You know, when you're sharing about the inner child, I have a story. So about a year ago, no, 2 years ago, as I'm stepping into believing in myself more and reparenting myself and all of that, I started going to networking event. And my very first networking event, I was so scared. I was like shake. This was 2 weeks prior. It wasn't even the event. And I was like, why am I so scared? Like, I'm an
Yeah,
adult. I fucking got this. I wrote books. I'm doing all kinds of shit.
I
You
know.
know what I mean? What the hell, right? But then I like remembered, I have this practice that I do. I pretend that my little girl is with me all the time. I put her in the car seat. We're going together. Would you like to eat? You know, just to have to operate from that inner child space. And then I realized it was her. She was scared because
She was scared.
no, we've never, every time we've had experiences where she was like in the limelight, it was like catcalling or something embarrassing. It was, you know, it wasn't like pleasurable. It wasn't done from a place of truly powerful, being of a powerful choice. And so I was like, all right, I got you. And so, you know, in a little meditation, I just envision like I grab her hands and I'm like, all right, we're going to go into this event and we're going to be us and we're going to show up. And if you're scared, I'm right here. I got you. And just like that little nurturing conversation, like work magic. Now I have my own events. Now I have no issues going anywhere. And I dress as her. Like most of the time you see me in pink or whatever, I'm wearing and I'm an outward expression of my inner self. And I truly believe that our inner child is our spirit, because that, you know, we come through, we we're separated from everything. But that's a whole deeper rabbit hole. But I wanted to share like my visualization of of reparenting myself has been a beautiful journey. And there is a little child inside of us who is definitely afraid of being abandoned. And we're the ones who really have to go back and say, I'm
Yeah,
not going to abandon you. I'm the one who abandoned you in the first place. I got you,
yeah,
and we're going to be okay in every moment. You know, that's my, I'm huge on inner child stuff.
yeah. So I could definitely riff on all this. So we'll just give your co-host an
I
opportunity
guess we can
to
give him
chat.
an opportunity.
Like, why is he even here?
Come on, Ashid, your turn.
No, no, it's absolutely right. So the point is like when you are in the flow, right? So it's better to listen and learn, right? So I was just like digesting, downloading all the stuff and everything, right? And definitely everyone has an inner child among us, and a lot of times we really sabotage that, right? We really ignore that, and we cannot conquer that or try to connect with them, right? Try to connect inside of
Yeah,
us. Like for myself, like I do a self-talking a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot, right? So every time anything comes up in my mind, I do the talking inside, right? What should I do? What should I do? And I get the answers, right? The good and bad and everything, right? And that's really important. That's really important because if you want to go from step one to step two, or point one to point B, or if you want to do the transformations of yourself, right? Your inner child is the one who should be motivated, who should be really motivated to go from there, and that's how you scale up your stuff. And that's really very important. And I do agree with Lazina, right? So my inner child was like always back on the time was very afraid of not talking, not mixing with the peoples and everything and others. When I figured out that no, I am just not doing the right things and I need to go for the people, I need to connect with the people in networking, I need to go there, I need to lift my comfort zone, I need to mix with the people, I need to understand, I need to listen. So all of the matters really helped me to redesign my inner child and to meet with the people around the world and to understand and help them, or maybe definitely getting help from there and getting motivated, right? So
yeah,
what about you, Cam, for your thoughts and everything, right?
yeah, yeah. So this is a really great perspective because we have Nasheed, whose inner child was already a driven and motivated person. And then your inner child was actually much more scared and felt abandoned. So there was a whole different approach that both of you took. One was for you, it was Nasheed, it wasn't so much trying to encourage and pep talk it because it already had that. It already had the drive. But it was more refining it in a way that could be more effective. And then for you, it was not so much like you could have refined it all you wanted. It would have just been more resistance because that wasn't the issue. The issue was that it was feeling like it was going to be abandoned and it needed to be taken care of. It needed to be nurtured. And there are different approaches to it. And I would say I've kind of run the gambit of that as well. I will say though, this isn't advice. I'm just saying my experience. I can kind of get tired of my inner child. And I know I shouldn't be saying that
What?
because he doesn't want to hear, because it could, you know, it's it can sometimes be so over too much, like always wanting attention and whatever. And I'm just expressing where I'm at. But I'm not saying we should say that to our inner child, like, oh, you're being too much, because that's what actually makes things worse. But I think the inner child work is really when we start looking at the different criterias. And like I said, in my journey, I had to unravel all the different layers. And really, what it comes down to is that inner child. When you unpack everything, it comes down to the inner child. So if a person can just go directly there, they could make much quicker progress.
Quantum leap this
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to go through the layers spending decades that I did.
directly
Now, here is,
leap.
yeah. Now, here is something that I do want people to understand. In this work, I found really the core of our challenges kind of comes down to that. And in a way that I don't really get to talk about so much is of all the clients I've worked through, of all the group coaching I've done, I've said I've written over 500,000 books, and the questions that come in, it all stems from the fact that people don't want to grow up. Like all of their issues are stemming from they want the result of the adult while still being a child. They want the result of going to the gym without going to the gym. They want the result of eating healthy without eating healthy. They want the results of doing well at networking events or the fame without putting in the grind. And a lot of it, I think it's reinforced by media. So when we look at a lot of mainstream music, I mean, we can go all the way down the decades from hip hop to glamour rock to classic rock to all the different things. It's essentially hitting on our inner child to like be young, do whatever we want, and have this lavish lifestyle. And then it's also ingrained into things like Peter Pan movie, where it's not wanting to grow up. The Toys R Us jingle, I don't want to grow up. The songs such as Forever Young. It's like we already have the inner child, and instead of helping it grow and become mature, a lot of the reinforcement through media is kind of saying it's okay to be that and actually be more of that. And I don't think it's actually very healthy because we still want to grow up. I think there are benefits to becoming an adult, not just benefits. By benefits, I mean when we were kids and we looked at adults, we thought, that's not a good life. I don't want to be like that. And then all this music and media reinforced being a child. But as I have veered toward being more of an adult, taking responsibility, showing up, doing the hard work, there's a pleasure and joy that's not possible any other way. So, what I want people to understand, especially one who is dealing with an inner child or who has that mindset of if I grow up, it'll be less pleasurable, is that you're not losing joy and pleasure at all. In fact, you're probably gaining more and at a depth that's not possible anyway. So I want people to keep that in mind because this is really the big thing I keep hitting up against. It's people come to me, and I'm sure you experience this. They're paying you for coaching and advice and help move forward, but they're resisting everything you want them to do. And it's that inner child that's coming up, and it's coming up for various reasons. You guys had examples, and it also can come up because media has almost rewarded us to stay in our childish behaviors. And there's good reason for that because as long as we stay childish, we still act on impulses and buy things we don't need, do things that are unhealthy, which is beneficial for the people selling that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think those are very wise words. And I love the way that you shared it too, because that is something that I find, well, in my world, because of the workshop that I go to, it's mostly the resistance of meeting the inner child and having to deal with the heaviness of it all
Yeah,
and reparenting. And that part of it becomes so stuck. But
yeah,
in my experience, it's been one of the most rewarding journey to reparent myself because then I get to have that creativity. I get to dream. I get to live from the things that I want to do without fear, like a kid running down the road and not caring about the car that's coming, right?
yeah,
I get to do that, but I get to do that from a grounded place, from a place of like I trust my intuition and I believe that this is the right course of action. There's a level of confidence and joy that comes with it that brings in fulfillment. And then for me,
yeah,
it showed me a lot more than just my purpose in life. It also showed me my inner being, how I even think about thoughts, observing them, because like Michael Singer, who is the thought, right? Are you observing it, or are you
Yeah.
becoming it? There's so much layers beyond it, and the world opens up, your mind
Yeah.
opens up, your heart opens up, there's coherence that happens, and it's directly on the other side of it. It is
Yeah.
directly on the other side of it, and unlearning everything to relearn that we really truly are magnificent beings, and we have so much inside of us to offer and to co-create together. It's a really cool ball.
Yeah, it is. So I am glad that you did resonate with what I had said. The inner child work can be hard, it can be annoying. And you did start off by saying, yeah, it can be a bit much. And the reason I do that is because I don't like to sugarcoat things. Again, I feel like the industry focuses on the end result, but not so much what's going to be required to get there. And that gets covered up. And so when people do get started on the path and they're not experiencing the joy of the end result, they either give up, they get frustrated, they think it's them, or they get upset with the industry as a whole. And I went through all that gambit as well. But the key is, it's in going through that we're gonna experience what you're experiencing right now. That joyful bliss, connecting to something deeper, something that you hadn't imagined, and having more control and creativity, all those things that are possible if we choose to go on that path.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining our conversation. Before we end today, is there any like message that you have, that you feel like you want to get out, that you haven't been able to in our in our conversation, because it's so packed with so much stuff?
Well, I did want to comment because you were saying how, how you show up is your expression of your inner child and how you dress. And the few times that we have talked, like one on this podcast and prior to the podcast, I see that in your behavior,
Thank you.
in your personality. So yeah, it's definitely an expression of that. And with this topic, I mean, there's so much I could cover. Like each sentence, as you were saying, I could riff on that and really go deep.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to. So I'll leave with what I usually end the podcast with. And that is, I want people to know wanting doesn't lead to having. Just because you want something doesn't mean you'll take the necessary steps to go after it. And what's challenging about this, our wants can make it seem like we will. Like I said, they can trigger some really powerful sensations. And in those sensations, we could be like, yes, I can do it. It's going to happen. And we may even have a plan of how it's going to unfold. But once those feelings fade, we're just as stuck and struggling. If a person can realize that when they do have a want, they don't get overly confident and they can realize, hey, there are going to be roadblocks and hurdles along the way. And more than likely, I'm going to be the one throwing them. And what's worse is my brain is going to make it seem like it's an external resistance when it's really internal. So if we can have that expectation, it makes it much more easy to get to the finish line. And when the roadblocks do come up, we're more prepared and it doesn't derail us. So it doesn't take us off course as much either. So that would be the message I would leave. And this might be a good time to plug in my course. I
Yes,
have a
do it.
course
Yes, let's go.
that goes much deeper into the topic of internal resistance. And it's called Conquer Internal Resistance to Achieve Your Next Goal. And they can learn about that on my website at kamknight.com. But more importantly, is I've got 3 free gifts for everyone listening here. One's called Prompt Engineering Your Mind. And it's based on the fact that the human brain was the original ChatGPT, and we can prompt it to give us answers and solutions. But unlike ChatGPT, we can prompt it so we can take action on those answers and solutions. And Nasheed kind of alluded to how he does it, though they can find a more structured approach to get started. The second is build skills and habits in your sleep. If we work on the unconscious, there's less resistance. If we push against the unconscious, it's all resistance. So if we want to move forward, it helps to rewire unconscious. And you can do that. And it's using self-talk, so something Rashid had alluded to as well. So he's definitely on the right path of how to move forward or how to get past the resistance. And then the third one is a deeper dive into the topic of resistance. It talks about the different criteria that come up that we didn't get a chance to discuss, something I call the tricks of resistance. But more importantly, something that we didn't get to talk about, which is our wants. Our own wants can be a challenge in us going after them. And they can learn about all of that on my website at kamknight.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I can't wait for this episode to air because I really resonated with so much of your conversation. And thank you again. I'm gonna be smiling all day after this conversation. I'm gonna go back to it a lot. And
Yeah,
so if anyone has this episode resonates with you, please share it. Do the like thing and the subscribe thing, and we want Cam's words of wisdom to meet many ears and make many impact, because I love what I see and what I witness, and you are somebody who you have a formula that is very good and very needed right now, so I support it.
absolutely. It's like a